the whole idea of vikas, which is a politically very edgy word. It really depends on who you're talking to, what is their ideological leanings. So that's, so the whole development discourse now, I mean, development is extremely political.
लाइट्स कैमरा आज़ादी एक ऐसा शो है जो हस्तियों को ढूंढ रहा है। ये वो हस्तियां हैं जिनने हमेशा समाज को चुनौती दी है। ये वो लोग हैं जो हमेशा निडर, आत्मविश्वासी और अग्रिम रहे हैं। भले ही जनता ने कभी इन्हें सराहा ना हो, मगर इन्होंने हमेशा देश के लिए काम किया है। हम इनसे बात करके इनका नज़रिया समझना चाहते हैं, जानना चाहते हैं कि ये लोग समाज को कैसे देखते हैं, और ये सीखना चाहते हैं कि ज़िंदगी को बिना डरे कैसे जिया जाए। मेरा नाम है वंदित जैन और मैं इन कहानियों को आप तक लाने का बस एक माध्यम हूँ।
हाय एवरीवन, वेलकम टू अनदर एपिसोड ऑफ लाइट्स कैमरा आज़ादी। एक सवाल आप लोगों से, आप लोग जब अपनी गवर्नमेंट को इलेक्ट करते हो तो क्या देखते हो? प्रोमिसेस, परफॉर्मेंस, आइडेंटिटी, लीडर। एक थीम जो मैक्सिमम स्टेट इलेक्शंस में कॉमन रही है वो है विकास की थीम। हम जीते तो विकास होगा, डेवलपमेंट होगा, सड़कें बनेगी, रोड बनेगी, हाईवे बनेंगे, ब्रिजेस बनेंगे, मेट्रो ट्रेन आएगी, बसेस चलेगी। ये विकास का नैरेटिव अब बहुत रिपीटेटिव हो चुका है। हमें इससे एक नए एंगल से देखना है। पत्रलेखा जी एक दिल्ली बेस्ड अवार्ड विनिंग जर्नलिस्ट है और हेल्थ और डेवलपमेंट के ऊपर एक्सटेंसिवली लिखती है। जितनी मेरी एज है शायद उतना उनका तजुर्बा है। मैं इनसे बात करके ये समझना चाहता था कि विकास होता क्या है, एक स्टेट के डेवलपमेंट मॉडल्स क्या होने चाहिए और एग्जिस्टिंग स्टेट्स के मॉडल का इनका क्या एनालिसिस है। अगर हम नेक्स्ट टाइम किसी पॉलिटिकल पार्टी को चुने तो हमारे पास कुछ ऐसे सवाल होने चाहिए जो हम उनसे कर सकें। मेरी इनसे मुलाकात एक ट्विटर रिकमेंडेशन से हुई एंड शी वॉज़ वेरी अप्रोचेबल एंड सपोर्टिंग। पहले फ्यू वीक्स में हमने ब्रेनस्टॉर्म करा कि किस टॉपिक पे बात करनी है और कौन सा टॉपिक रेलेवेंट है, एंड वी फाइनली फ्रीज्ड ऑन हेल्थ एंड डेवलपमेंट एंड रिकॉर्डेड ऑन 7th of June. This co-creating experience that I have with my guests before every episode is extremely rewarding and humbling. So without wasting any time, let us go and meet Patralekha ji. But before that, let us take a quick commercial break. This episode is brought to you by Miva Naturals. Miva is a homemade brand dedicated to your personal care experience. Miva make products with dedication, love, and with a touch of nature. They do not use any chemicals or harmful substances in their products to ensure that you get the best feeling, which is long lasting. Miva makes products which are colorful and are fun to use, and it aims to be your best experience in the whole day. If you'd like to order your first Miva product, please go to Instagram and type Miva_naturals and tell them that you are a listener of Lights Camera Azadi and get an instant 10% off. 3, 2, 1. Patralekha Chatterjee, welcome to Lights Camera Azadi.
Thank you.
So yeah, is this your first podcast? Are you excited?
Yeah, I've done a couple of sort of panel discussions on audio and television, but yeah, probably podcast, probably this is the first one, so I'm quite excited. Yes.
So पत्रलेखा जी, हम हमेशा आपने हेल्थ के ऊपर और डेवलपमेंट के ऊपर, विकास के ऊपर काफी कुछ लिखा है। तो एक बहुत ही ऑब्वियस सवाल था मेरे दिमाग में कि ये विकास होता क्या है, एंड व्हाट इज डेवलपमेंट, एंड हाउ डू वी शुड लुक एट विकास एंड डेवलपमेंट।
Vandit, if I can call you just Vandit, and you
Yeah.
can just call me Patralekha, because at least in our profession, journalism, we don't have really. I don't believe in senior and junior. You are as good as your last report. So there's no kind of hierarchy in this. तो देखिए, विकास ये जो शब्द है, आपको पता होगा कि ये विकास अब इसका मतलब बहुत कुछ हो सकता है. डेवलपमेंट, what is development is the $1 million question, and it really depends on who you talk to, right? I if I can share a little joke with you, many years ago, I've been writing on development for more than 30 years, and I always looked at it in a certain way. I saw it as health, education, equity. I was in Mumbai, and I was actually in a parlor. I was getting a haircut, and there was this lady sitting next to me, and we were. I think there was a power cut or something like that. We were just, she started chatting with me, and she said, "What do you do?" So I said, "I write on development." So at which point she said, "Oh, that's very exciting." So I said, "Yeah, I mean, I think so." So she said, "You must meet my husband." So I kind of looked at her because I didn't know her. We didn't even know each other's names, and I was wondering why she wants me to meet her husband. So I said, "Yeah, but what does he do?" So she said, "He's a contractor. He's into real estate. Roads, buildings." And it was yeah. Actually, I had I kind of smiled. Of course, I could laugh because it looked very impolite, and I've eaten out on this story many times. But I think it goes to actually the heart of what you say divergence in how you approach development. जैसे विकास अब बहुत तरह आप सोच सकते हैं कि विकास या ब्रिजेस हाईवेज इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर यही है विकास और ये स्वास्थ्य शिक्षा so it's really. And if I can bring in there's a very famous actually a saying. It was attributed to it's a quote from a former mayor of Bogota. I think his name was Gustavo Petra. I may be wrong, but he was definitely a former mayor of Bogota, Colombia. He described a developed country like this. He said, a developed country is not a place where the poor have cars, it is where the rich use public transportation. Now, you see how you can see development. I mean, some people would see it as bullet trains, some people would see it as, equal access to a good public transport system, equal access to healthcare, good education system, so that there's a level playing field. So you see how the whole idea of vikas, which is a politically very edgy word. It's really depends on who you're talking to, what is their ideological leanings. So that's so the whole development discourse now, I mean, development is extremely political, and the discourse on development has also got political because of this. But one thing I would say that one common denominator between all approaches to development, which I think most people, at least publicly, will agree, is that development is about reduction of poverty. But of course, this discourse has evolved. Prior to 1970s, that development was mostly seen as a purely as an economic phenomenon, and a rapid gain in overall per capita GNP, gross national product. That's how we measure development. And the idea was that, okay, if you had a higher GNP, there would be a trickle down effect, and then everybody would, come up to a certain level. That was the sort of assumptions. But over say the last 30 years, more than that, 40 years, there's been a shift. And say from 1990, we've had this concept. It's actually started with United Nations Development Program coming up with the Human Development Index (HDI), and it's a lot of people. Their thinking went into it. The Human Development Index. It's about life expectancy, education, healthcare, gender equity, lots of things. So, Amartya Sen, everybody's heard of him, Nobel laureate, Indian, and also Pakistani economist, Dr. Mehbul Haq. I mean, actually, he was I think it's the first report, the UNDP's Human Development Report, where he said people are the real wealth of the nation. So you see, the discourse about development, has actually changed a lot, and people like Sen and Jean Drèze and many other broadly who would be seen as left leaning, though I just see it as more like more inclined towards social justice, see it more as a capability to function. It's not just about how much money you have or you don't have, but do you have equal opportunities? Do you have the equal capability to function? So I would say, in short, the development discourse is actually evolving, and of course, one of the things I know, as an Indian, as a journalist, one of the things which is extremely, I would say, disheartening is that though India has made tremendous economic progress and has lifted millions of people out of poverty since the 1990s, our Human Development Index continues to be very, very bad. And I think we were last HDI report, which I think was released December last year, Out of 189 countries that were covered, 187 is actually part of the UN along with Palestine and Hong Kong. India was ranked 129. I mean, 129th rank out of 189 countries, and it climbed only one rank above than the previous HDR 2018, where it was ranked 130. So I think that's actually from a purely development, I mean, the way I see development, I think that's not a very good state of affairs.
I understand, Patralika ji, where you're coming from, and but also I don't think we hear a lot of HDI in the popular narratives of the governments, especially state government. So, and I was always confused as a voter, as a citizen, that what are different state governments bringing on the table every 5 years. So, and I want to ask you and understand you from you, okay, what do they, when they say that, we are a successful government, what do they mean? Do they measure their success by number of amount of roads that they have built, the bridges that they have built, and the infrastructure they have put in, or do they have their own mechanisms which are, if not exactly HDI, but on in lines of that?
If you're talking in the Indian context, and I presume you are mostly referring to India, there is, again, this HDI index or any national statistic that you can tell. HDI index is, of course, an international metric. Anything about India, you say, the average will always mask a huge range. So, when you talk about state governments, you will have to talk about which state governments, their politics, where have they been in the development discourse. So, for instance, it's pretty well known, now we don't use that term so much, that the northern part of the country, northern India, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Jharkhand, these are Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, these have been traditionally lagging behind in human development, right? And the southern parts, the southern states, the south and the west, have been traditionally more developed. Now, if you take, say, a state like Kerala, the famous Kerala model, Kerala is, it's an interesting paradox that it's extremely high in human development. And of course, there's a whole history behind it, which we can go into later on in our conversation this evening. It can't be replicated overnight, though of course successive governments, in post-independence have done a lot. But you take something like Tamil Nadu, which is not a poor state, and it's also doing very well in human development. The southern states, so this whole dichotomy that which I personally don't buy. This binary that it's either bridges and highways or it is schools and healthcare. I don't think this really stands up, because most states which have successful in economically have also done, they also have good human capital. I mean, going back to what Mehbul had said, people are the greatest wealth. I mean, whether you see it in India or look at any successful market economy anywhere in the world, there really is no example of any country which has truly done well, become a leader with really millions and millions of people who are totally unlettered or semi-lettered or no skills and a sickly population. So I actually personally see, the way I see development, which is where the human development part of it is a big part of the story, though I wouldn't say it's the only part of the story, is actually extremely essential. Whatever may be your ideology, in the modernizing world, where skills become extremely necessary, you have to. It's really about tackling the basic, and it's also about strengthening your foundation. So yeah, states also have their human development report, and again, as I said, there's again, you'll see a huge disparity between the southern states and the northern states. Typically, of course, again, north is also not homogeneous. So a state like, say, Himachal, for instance, would be doing pretty well in Uttarakhand, will be doing pretty well in many human development indicators, right? And northeast has its own legacy issues. Then if you take something like, say, gender equity, it again varies hugely. So at situation, the development discourse varies from state to state. Now, what you prioritize, what you talk about, I think depends on the politics, depends on the political regime. So, for instance, Gujarat, the famous Gujarat model, which has been talked about a lot, is essentially it's a mixed picture, right? Gujarat is very good in infrastructure and economic growth of a certain type, but it is more capital intensive economic growth, and on many human development indicators Gujarat hasn't done well. But as I said, Gujarat has done well on infrastructure and things. So it depends what you choose to talk about, what you choose to foreground will, I think, depend on what are the political priorities of the government of the day, whoever is in power.
So, Patralekha, being very specific here, मतलब मैं नॉर्थ और स्पेशली हिंदी हार्टलैंड के दो पार्टीज की पॉलिटिक्स जो कि काफी सिमिलर भी है और फिर भी काफी अलग हो जाती है, तो
हाँ.
उनका जो विकास का नैरेटिव है विच इज
Hmm.
कांग्रेस एंड बीजेपी,
Hmm.
how do you think both of these parties have a different idea of development in your experience?
For instance, if you take a state like Uttar Pradesh, which is at the heart of the Hindi heartland with 200 million people, almost the population of Brazil. It has had different political parties in power. And of course, things have improved. But, the fundamentally, I mean, I've always wondered. I mean, I was many, many years ago in the late 80s, I was posted in Uttar Pradesh. And you keep wondering a state which is, in the Gangetic plain, which is, rich agriculture, how does it lag behind so much, in all human development? And it's not that they're doing well economically, so it is not even, in Gujarat, okay, you can say it's the economy versus the human. Say in the state is like Uttar Pradesh, though I'm not saying nothing has happened, the things are happening, but it seems to lag behind in very, very critical areas, in terms of, you take any human development indicators, it is so for instance, if you say Uttar Pradesh will make Uttar Pradesh into a South Korea. It can't be done overnight. You have to invest. And I think it goes down to certain factors seem to be, I'm not saying these factors are unique to Uttar Pradesh, but they seem to be leveraged a lot more. Caste, the whole Hindu Muslim thing. And the fact that I again don't say that people who are unlettered, I think the right consciousness is much less, which makes it a lot more easy to get away with a lot. I mean, for instance, with all its flaws, say a state like Kerala or Tamil Nadu or even West Bengal, in many areas, the right conscious is much higher. I would say that when you have more demanding citizenry, demanding people, there is a push. You take a state like Tamil Nadu, for instance, no matter which government is in power, and there also again two parties, there's certain basic things happen, the basic healthcare, the basic education. There is a kind of bipartisan consensus. But I think in many states in the Hindi heartland, unfortunately, it's a different set of factors which seems to be play, and where these are not really the major talking. They sometimes they can become talking points in non-election time, but when it comes to election, it's again the usual. Though, I mean, again, if you talk to BJP, which is in power, they would say they've a fantastic amount has happened in Uttar Pradesh, and I don't say that nothing has happened in the last 6 years. But still, as we see, there is a very, very large number of migrants happen to originate from Uttar Pradesh. So the common sense conclusion is that if a state is doing very, very well, why would people go out? So I think, and again, I don't want to just focus on Uttar Pradesh. I think Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, all these states have a lot more. Earlier there used to be a term called Bimaru. I think it was coined by the famous demographer Ashish Bose, and which is, of course, it was just an acronym. Yes, I think the northern state, there's definitely the development course and the development trajectory of the north and the south are different, and whoever has been in power has not been doing that much. I mean, Uttar Pradesh could be right at the top. Why not? I mean, it has a lot of assets. So I've always been actually quite mystified on why such a huge state. Of course, a lot of people say that it's because it's so large. That is its biggest problem, and the fact that part of it was sliced off. Uttarakhand, that actually helped Uttarakhand, the hilly thing. So that there may be something in that, but I think a lot. I believe that a lot of the change, the push for the change, actually has to come from the people, from the bottom. I mean, if people if people are become more demanding, doesn't matter who is in power, will probably have to change. I mean, I really don't expect somebody who is in position of power to really lead the change for a very, very equitable, I'm just being a bit cynical, for a very equitable society, because they stand to lose by that.
With what you have defined, around HDI and development, do you think, do you call our model of development, Aam Aadmi Party's model of development, a successful model? Do you think they have done well in Delhi?
Again, Delhi is a very complex story, but definitely, and there are definitely a lot of implementation glitches, as in many other states. But I think the focus on education and health is definitely welcome. And government schools. I mean, some things are not really contested. You can actually debate maybe the extent, but yeah, I mean, a lot of people are now putting their kids in government schools, and the quality of government schools have improved in, I don't say everywhere, but definitely a start. In healthcare, the focus on mohalla clinics is of course very good, and I think that's also a thing. But development, though, I am, because I write on education and health, I'm focusing on education and health a lot. But again, it's part of the story, right? So as I said, you also need other infrastructure, other it's like just education and health alone will not solve your problem. So Delhi has, Delhi is also, as a national capital, I think it's a very challenging place, and as you know, it's also right now it is caught in this whole polarizing discourse between the central government and the opposition. AAP and the BJP are always seems to be at each other's throats. That certainly doesn't make things easier. I think, I mean, as a Delhiite, I wish that at least there was a bipartisan consensus on some basic things, and there wasn't always point scoring. That said, I think the Delhi government, I mean, no state government or no political party, I mean, I'm not affiliated to any political party or don't bat for any political party. I think the implementation in many ways, it needs to be toned up. And I mean, as we are right now in the middle of a pandemic, as we are seeing, that there is that it's not able to cope at every level, though I think it's trying its best. So yeah, I mean, AAP is very explicitly made education and healthcare as its priorities, and I think that's very good. But having said that, Delhi as a place, and irrespective of which government is in power, Delhi is not representative. Delhi is the national capital, and let's also face it that yes, we have a lot of challenges in Delhi, but we're also a lot more pampered. We also have a lot of things. If you look at just say doctor patient ratio or anything, what an average Delhiite has access to. You can't compare it to, let's say, Jharkhand or Chhattisgarh or Northeast or Arunachal Pradesh. So, Delhi is very, very, very kind of unique that way.
You know, Patralekha, I have heard about the development models of BJP for a very long time. I've definitely heard now Aam Aadmi Party's development models,
Right.
and now I've started also hearing about Kerala's development model, which is the left development model. What I think I have found is I have never heard or explicitly heard about Congress's development model. Is it because of their politics, or it's a little political question? But I do not know if they have a development model state wise, and because I have not heard of it anywhere.
Well, I mean, was in power mostly for a major part, right, of post independence. So I think you start hearing, and it was in power in most places, well, no longer, but so I don't think there was, they did, when you are in power, you probably don't feel the need to define. But broadly, again, if you contrast, and I think the Congress development model, for whatever its worth, was not uniform in every state. So there again, when they had good implementation, I think it was it worked better. But very broadly speaking, if you, for instance, were to ask its critics, or say or people at the purely ideological level, I'm not talking about the political level, what would distinguish I'm not saying Congress, but let's say UPA model from, let's say, the NDA model that we have. I think one difference that I see, I'm not sure whether they would agree with it, is that though of course everybody talks about inclusiveness and vikas, these are common, these are buzzwords, right? I mean, there isn't any political party which would say we are against vikas, right? How loudly you say it is different, but I think, or inclusiveness. But I think in the Congress model, there was more. UPA 1 particularly, which I think was the better part of the UPA. I mean, UPA 1, UPA 2, UPA 1, I think a lot of people do recognize that UPA 1 did achieve a few things in terms of, the kind of the architecture of development. I think there was a lot more focus on rights. For instance, we had the right to education, we had the right to information, the okay, healthcare. I think the National Rural Health Mission, which is now just called National Health Mission, 2005 it was formed. So I think these were actually milestones. But you're right that though they did a lot of, and I think the National Rural Health Mission, for instance, did definitely improve maternal and child health in quite quite substantively. But I agree with you that I think they were not very good at, and of course they made lots of mistakes. Yeah, I'm not going to defend that, but I think they've not been very good at branding their development approaches. They didn't really, even during the recent elections, I found that while Mr. Modi was outstanding in showcasing whatever he has done, or true or not, I don't think the Congress, I never heard too many Congress people talking about the National Rural Health Mission, for instance, 2005, which was a milestone. The ASHA worker, now the ASHA worker is you would have heard, like the backbone of the frontline worker. All that was done during UPA time. They don't seem to have been very good at putting it coherently and kind of packaging it as a development model. I think sometimes it was kind of very diffuse, and maybe different people spoke in different voices or in very abstract terms. And again, there were implementation glitches. There was a lot of corruption, especially towards UPA, which was discovered more in the UPA 2, and one major reason why they were voted out, because a lot of people were extremely upset that the in the name of development lots of things were happening which wasn't really helping ordinary people. Even the technology, Rajiv Gandhi brought in a lot of things. But I think that they've not been able to really sort of put it together and call it the Congress model of development.
Exactly. Yeah, that was the word I was looking for. That nobody knows that what is the Congress model of
I
development,
mean, yeah.
especially in the state.
Yeah, as I said, like if you, because some of us are older, so we know, and Congress has been in power for decades, right? So I think maybe they didn't feel the need to have a special, I mean, call it anything, because they were in power, and you usually do these branding exercises if you're against somebody, or if you think you're winning a race. So maybe it was complacency, or I don't know. I mean, I don't really cover politics, so I don't really know what the reason is. But yeah, lots of things happened, which were actually, a lot of the information we are getting is, right to information. That was Right to Information Act 2000. I think it was 9. I mean, I'm not sure the year, but yeah, I mean, right to education. Yes, you could say that there were flaws in it. Everything wasn't perfect, and it all depends on what are your benchmarks. But they did put into place lots of things. But to put it as a develop, and yeah, and their accent has all been on inclusiveness and talking about it. Of course, that doesn't mean that every state government was inclusive. And I think, for instance, a state like Uttar Pradesh, the regional parties had been in power for a very long. The Congress kind of, I think, left the battlefield quite some time ago, right? So I think they also, when you say, a talking point, it's one thing to be a talking point, let's say in Delhi, or as we are speaking, or in a sort of a conference milieu, India International Center, or academic papers, and quite another to actually kind of unbundle it in a language. You asked Vikas, what does Vikas mean? I write for Amar Ujala, a Hindi newspaper, and I've written many columns on this, and you have to unbundle it, because the person, let's just say, who's a farmer, or an Anganwadi worker is not thinking of Vikas in the abstract, right? What does Vikas mean to somebody who's right below, right? So I think that's an important part where again I think we've slipped up. We need to talk. We need to kind of, and it would again vary from state to state, and even maybe district to district. We have to talk about it, localize the discussion, in a way that the person can, relate. Now, primary health care, traditionally, right from independence, and in fact, I think maybe later on again we can talk about what some of the other Asian countries did. Our focus was, and again it's not about states but nationally, was on higher education, the IITs, the IIMs, the AIMS. Now that was very good, but what we did not focus enough was on the foundation, the primary healthcare, the primary education. And again, there's a sort of left leaning or social justice critique of this, and people would say it was a very Brahminical model by which it's not meant just caste, but the guys at the top. So while this model, for instance, aims or the government medical education, it's among the best and it's the cheapest if you manage to get through those exams. Anywhere else you would be paying, an arm and a leg for it. It did not, some people, it helped a certain section, say people like you and me and our friends. A certain section it helped, it empowered, and we saw a lot of that happening after the 1990s. That doesn't mean that no one else benefited, but I think the base wasn't strength. So while we and that explains this whole two-tiered two-track India, in a very simple, in a simple way. It's a two-track India that we have the best of healthcare institutions and we have the worst. We have the best of education and we have the worst. And it all depends on, how you were brought out, what could you access. I mean, if you went to, let us say, a primary school in let's say Bihar or Eastern UP without any facilities, let's say they're not even a school building, not even anything, not even a teacher, no basic things, and you compare a person who comes out of a product of a system like that, and you expect them to compete with somebody who's been to the poshest private schools. I don't think that's fair, right? So because a section of our society, I would say upper middle class rich people, they didn't act, why would they didn't have to bother about the public facilities because they never went for it, right? They always put their kids, their everybody, in private schools, private hospitals. So what happens to the policy making class, so to speak? And this I think cuts across party lines. I mean, I don't think there's any huge divide between the right and the left in this, and so I think that's one reason. So other countries where the ordinary person uses, I mean, in the South, to come back to healthcare, one reason why, say, Tamil Nadu has a good healthcare system is a lot of middle class people use it, right? So the people who can make a noise, vocal, if they are using the same facilities, the standards will go up. But once you start saying this is only for poor people, I think, I mean, this is not my original observation. Somebody I think has said it before. If you start looking at specific facilities as for poor people alone, it will be also a poor standard.
Can you also, talk a little bit about what makes Kerala model unique, efficient, and what can other states learn from it?
Okay, I mean, Kerala model. I've been to Kerala a few times, on a vacation. It's one of my favorite states, and also on work. I was there during, I think, one of their floods 2 years ago, I think. So I think one thing we must understand about the Kerala model. Yes, there's a lot to learn from Kerala. I mean, Kerala has one of the highest HDIs, in all the states, right? And Kerala really cannot be compared with most Indian states. It's closer to Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, in every way, right? But as I said, the Kerala model cannot be replicated overnight. The foundations of social change in Kerala, it goes back centuries ago, 16th century almost. It has had for instance, it was part of the princely state of Travancore, right? The rulers of the Travancore, they were at the forefront of the spread of education. Kerala had a school for girls. It was, I think, established by the Maharaja himself in 1859, which was an an unprecedented act in the Indian subcontinent at that time. And also, their mass protests for social causes, rights of untouchables, etc. Many of that was not actually led by the upper castes. It was led by people from what you would call at the the lower so-called lower caste. I mean, they've had, say, in contrast with North India, enlightenment in Kerala was driven by people like, say, so-called lower caste. I don't believe in the caste system. That's why I'll say so-called lower caste. People like, maybe I'm getting the pronunciation wrong, Kuriakose Elias, then Narayana Guru, So these are belonging to caste groups which are considered lower in the social settings of 19th century Kerala. Kerala's, their literacy movement, started long, long ago. Ernakulam was the first, I think, place which became almost 100% literate. So Kerala has had Kerala's literacy rate is, I think, more than 95% even now, right? Volunteer movement. Again, it's geography, the arrival of Europeans, the Christian missionaries played a very important part. Arrival of Europeans, beginning with the Portuguese, then I think there were the Dutch, the English, many Catholics. So they've been very open. The arrival of missionaries from European nations, that contributed greatly to the rise in educational institutions in Kerala, and also rise of educated class among, say, caste groups like the Ezavas. So Kerala has a whole history, but Kerala has also, leveraged its history and its past. So, successive communist and other governments, they've invested in healthcare, in education. And one thing I learned, covering floods in the aftermath of floods in Kerala, and also you see how they manage the Nipah epidemic and also this the COVID-19. Kerala's health system, it functions much better during times of crisis because it functions during normal times. So the main essential point to know is that you can't, it's not something like a rabbit out of a hat. You can't make a dysfunctional health system or education system work miraculously during an emergency. It won't. Well, I mean, for instance, during the floods, what I saw, Kerala is a major leader in palliative care. So they use those people to deal with people during disasters. So they are very good at pulling together strategic plans. And again, because education and health go together. So if you have a literate population, if you have highly educated healthcare, I mean, you see that the famous Kerala nurses, they're all over. I mean, the one thing they don't have so much is industry. That's why they're human exports, they go all over the world, right? So yeah, so the Kerala model, I think it's if you want to start copying, I think it still would take quite some time to actually get to Kerala's. It can't be something which can be copied, just copied and copy pasted and overnight. It's essentially, it boils down to, I mean, Sri Lanka, the same story. Focusing on basics, education, healthcare, having that goes towards having a productive workforce. Of course, Kerala has had industry problems, the unions and stuff like that. So it's not exactly the industrialists' favorite state. And Kerala is, and Kerala has problems. It's not that one should not also romanticize Kerala. Kerala's development model is also hugely dependent on remittances, which sometimes it's not totally within your control. अब देखिए, अब जैसे गल्फ में बहुत सारे लोग चले जाते हैं. Though you must, one thing I wanted to say, कि earlier Kerala was leading, in migration, going outside India. To especially to places like Gulf. Even now, in terms of remittances, in terms of volume, Kerala is still leading, but the number, places like Uttar Pradesh is fast catching up, because Kerala, they're not going to do things for such, the lower wage stuff Kerala people will not do. So Kerala, but now even in the Gulf, there is a whole focus on a protectionist labor model. Only local people should be applied. So a lot of the Gulf people are coming back. So I mean, the Kerala model is going through a challenging times.
There was this article, and I'm moving to Gujarat now,
Hmm.
there was this article that you have written in 2015, which said that how an Indian city emerged from a plague and become a public health leader. It was about Surat,
Yes,
and
yes.
how the municipality of Surat, under the leadership of S.N. Rao, transformed itself, and it was ahead when it came to public health emergencies.
Hmm.
Uh, Now my question is that I did not heard, or in my research I could not come across anything remarkable which Gujarat or Surat or did in the times of pandemic. So what went wrong? And this is not a very old article. This is like 5 years old.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
so where did they digress? And clearly, in from your article, one can really understand that they had the system and an administration and the infrastructure in place, but I don't know, did they are they still that good or not? That's my
I see.
question.
I've been actually asking that question. I don't know because again, I don't say Gujarat universally was good. I think Surat was, an outlier. What I would say, the Surat model, the fact that Surat managed to leverage a public health crisis to rejig its entire health system, totally reboot itself. There was a lot of factors: an excellent commissioner, enlightened business, the people, the employees. I mean, I met a whole lot of people, migrant workers, diamond barons. I met a whole range of people. I went actually from colony to colony with, some of their frontline. I mean, if you read that story, you would have seen. I actually went on one of the,
Yeah.
yeah. So how he climbed, there was no lift and he climbed 16 floors, and to actually go inside houses and check if there was any, larva. I think that was the Surat model. I don't think that was the Gujarat model necessarily because so it was just a combination of factors. I've been actually asking, what actually happened. Though having said that, I think the pandemic definitely is. It's nobody could have expected this. I mean, because the kind of things, see, a lot of the initial problems, of say Surat, it was not just a health crisis; it was also the migrant crisis. If you remember, there were a lot of incidents. So
Yeah.
so the thing, that's the thing, right? Now, we okay, when I was researching my health story, I didn't go into all those other issues. So it's I think the pandemic actually has, I mean, I'm not taking away from Surat's achievements. I think it's a fantastic story. And honestly, I don't have an honest answer because I haven't been over there. I've been asking. It is possible that, that constellation of factors, an excellent commissioner, that actually makes a huge difference. The kind of, because, in India, so many places you've seen excellent things are happening because there is that local leadership is very strong. Now, because with the same manpower, I mean, people start doing things if the leadership is very good and if they can energize them, incentivize them. Like this man, for instance, I mean, he said, he was to do it from morning to night. It wasn't like he was being paid a huge amount. There's these inspectors whom I roamed around with when I was researching my story. A lot of that depends on local leadership. I've not really followed, I really wouldn't be able to comment on what exactly, but I think it is possible that there has been some slippage. Sometimes there can be also complacency, sad if that's happened. And also, pandemic, I think, is an extraordinary situation which nobody could have, expected. Having said that, I would say that, and I've been doing a lot of reports and columns and essays, including for international media like the Atlantic, on this whole, the migration. I think informal sector. I think what it has done, the Indian model. It sort of gets by during crisis times. But when an extraordinary dhakka, as you say, it comes, it splices open a lot of our real serious inward problem. It's like you have a room, and let's say it's very dirty. And then you have a guest or something coming, and you take a bed sheet, a nice, pretty bed sheet or something from somewhere, and you cover up everything. But it that's not a lasting solution, right? By covering up things. So I think, for instance, the whole informal sector story, it's all linked, right, to development. I mean, a major part of our success story hinges on the informal sector, which everybody knows. It's not something which happened only during the pandemic. It was all there. We just chose not to see it, right? So almost 80% of your workforce, I think it's even more, is part of the informal sector. Out of the informal sector means what? Which means that they're not part of any kind of formal structure. Now, it doesn't mean that, not like consultants or something. This is people who are a very large number, like right at the bottom, working without any kind of, contracts, any kind of basic minimum facilities, no benefits, no social. And why are they doing it? Because they don't have a choice, right? And they don't really have a huge number of options. And they like, you look at the migrants. Now, why would somebody go? I was watching an interview of somebody from Bihar who went to one of the southern states, and he said that he was made fun of, right? Every time, and not just during the pandemic, but even before. And he was very sad, and he was saying, the only reason why I'm here is because, well, pet ki mare, bhook, hunger. That's a real stark fact, right? Why do people go to the other end of the country, in a place where the culturally, in every way, and also work in terrible conditions? Now, all this was there, and it's just that the pandemic and then the lockdown, which I think was really not very well thought out when it was initially, imposed, when it was initially announced, March 25th, I think. What, 25th, right? Was it 25th? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
23rd, 25th. Yeah.
23rd, yeah, 23rd. So, when we saw this, that is the defining image of the pandemic. These hundreds and thousands of people on the highway, with these jholas on their back, with their children, then it hit us. But these people didn't come out of Mars. They didn't just, so, and then you think, what is their state of health? What is their state of education? Can you, I mean, now we are very surprised by lots of things which actually should not surprise us if you just follow the development. I mean, because some of us write on development, we know this a little bit more than others. But if you know that, nothing should come actually as a surprise, right? I mean, there are millions and millions of people who are subsisting at, below it, not just economically, but without the minimum basics, right? And that is why you have the kind of disease burden you have. And now virus doesn't respect, they don't care about your ideology. They don't care whether you're from Bihar or Kerala, or whether you're left leaning or right wing, or whether you like Mr. Modi or whether you don't like Mr. Modi, or whatever. They don't care. So now all these people in such close proximity, you're at higher risk. And again, lockdown has of course been much tougher on the people at the bottom, because um they don't really, this business of work from home, it depends. Work from home is okay for white collar people, but not for everybody else. Like, if you're, let's say, a construction worker or a loader or a cook, what work from home? So and again, it gets down to, it's all very well to say, okay, do something else. But if you are, let's say, class 3 pass or class 4 pass, I mean, which is a very huge segment of our population, right? I mean, they may be literate, but not really have the basic education base to go and do something else. What are they going to do? So I think our challenges are definitely more than other countries, including China. Yeah, China is the only country which I think we could possibly compare ourselves to in terms of numbers. But China doesn't have millions and millions and millions of people who are, totally unlettered, or, didn't finish school. So yeah, they have a lot of other problems, their political system, etc. But in terms of the basics, most of their people have their basics.
Hmm. What is your opinion on smart cities, which is again a very popular narrative?
Yeah, I used to
Yeah.
actually, I used to once upon a time write for a publication an American one. It's closed down. It's called Cityscope, and I went to a very large number of smart city conferences. There was a time, if you remember, there was a kind of a flood of smart city conferences, right? And I used to always ask this, what exactly? I never could quite figure out, what exactly is a smart city. I mean, it depends on who you were again talking to, and what what they had in mind. But I think the main thing is smart city, is was never really, as I mean, again, as I said, it meant different things to different people. But smart city was typically actually a smart enclave. If you study, what did they mean by smart cities? It wasn't ever going to be the entire city, right? It was going to be a part of the city, or which you would develop, which would kind of dress it up. And I think that again, it boils down to what we've been discussing, the equity model. So it in a situation, I'm not against technology, or not saying that there's no place for developing. Everybody cannot be exactly at the same model. But I think if you look at it, for instance, through the say East Asian model, I think, frankly, I think what we need is fully functional cities, with provision of basic services like sanitary, sewage disposal, waste system, water, safe water for everybody, power supply, healthcare, basic education, and futuristic smart cities. It effectively lends up becoming smart enclaves. And then there is an inherent structural problem over here. I mean, I remember going to many of these smart city conferences where people like street vendors would they usually wouldn't be given a huge place in this but platform, but sometimes they would manage to muscle into some session, and they would start asking what would be considered kind of inconvenient questions, like where do they fit in? So we have a lot of cities which don't even have electricity, 24 by 7 electricity, or there are a lot of power outages. If in a place which everything is predicated on, let us say, technology and power, everybody doesn't have a smartphone. So while I think you can definitely develop places, certain enclaves, in futuristic models, I think the focus should be on basically fully functional cities, because I think it would benefit a larger percentage of the population. And also, I think that it's in no one's interest to have this island of something where it's fantastic, surrounded by a huge pool of deprivation. I think that's inherently a slightly problematic from a law and order perspective. So it is like actually a gated community kind of model, right? Now, in a place, let's say, like South Korea, where or other say Japan, it's a different idea, because their poverty levels, or they're much, it's very different, right? So they don't have that kind of South Asian or Indian style abysmal poverty. So it's a different discourse over there. So I don't think we can actually copy, though we can definitely, as I said, you can definitely take certain elements, like use of technology in certain places, where we have. So I think, and I am not sure whether it was a very successful enterprise. I mean, I don't know whether you've heard a lot about smart cities in recent times. I've not, in the last year or so. A year or two. I don't think. I have heard a lot about smart city. I don't really know what happened to all those big flagship projects and all those conferences which were held. And it was, I know, at one point it was the big talking point.
Mm. Yeah, I started hearing about smart cities when my hometown Indore used to, flash up that Indore is chosen as one of the top 100 smart
Oh,
cities
yeah,
that the
yeah.
government.
I'd love to know what
Yeah,
happened. I mean, Indore was also the clean city, right? And that's
yeah,
very interesting. And maybe you could tell me a little bit, because the same question that you were asking me about Surat. Indore was also a clean city.
yes,
Indore
yeah,
was again been one of the hot spots, right? In COVID-19, right?
yeah,
If I remember,
yeah.
if I'm following it. So how do you Indore better than me. What is the issue over here?
See, definitely for when it comes to winning cleanliness, Indore had a very 360-degree turnaround,
Yeah.
and it was not just about. And I think why I call it a turnaround, that it was not just about a fully functional Nagarpalika, but I call it a success because it managed to change the attitude of people as well,
Right.
and a culture. It brought a cultural change that people rose to a certain consciousness that I cannot litter, and I should also avoid people who are littering.
Right.
So
Right.
so the cleanliness part was there.
Right.
I never saw a major development when it came to health.
Hmm.
Probably there were a few government hospitals, they might have improved a little bit,
Hmm.
uh, but I don't think Indore was anywhere gaining momentum when it came to health. Cleanliness was definitely good. Sanitization was an important part,
Hmm.
and it added to what we call as the bhari chamak of a city. कि जब आप सिटी में उतरते हो तो आपको
हाँ
सड़कें अच्छी
हाँ
दिखती हैं, यू
अच्छी
सी
दिखती
डस्टबिन
है
दिखते हैं
हाँ
आप.
but it was
हाँ
clean
हाँ हाँ.
outwardly. I mean that also matters, you know, that matters,
It
right?
matters.
Of course, of course,
It
of course.
matters.
but ये जो हॉटस्पॉट बनी है इंदौर, इसका कारण क्या है?
I don't know honestly. मतलब I have been in Gurgaon only,
हाँ.
and बहुत local news मैंने देखी नहीं है.
Hmm.
A lot of people blame it on the Jamatis, but I think that
I
is a
think that's a
false narrative.
simplistic, or I mean, it may not be
Yeah,
entirely false, but I think it's a simplistic thing to reduce
it's
it to
a
just one reason. And
yes.
you know, for instance, Gujarat. I mean, Gujarat is, you see, doing pretty badly in terms of you know, the managing the pandemic. Not doing very well, at least the last I saw. So you know, ab jo gets down to how you see health. Health is, I mean, I used to also teach health journalism, and I remember lot of students would ask me, you know, health journalism, you know, young people, नहीं interest नहीं है हमें क्योंकि health तो सिर्फ ये doctors, medicines, injection इसके बारे में है. So you know, this is a very what shall I say, very simplistic way of looking at health. You know, is a result of what we call social determinants. मतलब बहुत सारे factors. तो अब जैसे मैंने, you know, what we've been talking about, all these issues, you know, equity, gender, education, state of infrastructure, ये सब चीजों का impact health में जाके, you know, पढ़ते हैं. So for instance, if you have, as you say, a city or a whatever a state, you know, which outwardly looks very nice, but अंदर अंदर क्या हो रहा है आपको पता नहीं. जैसे घर के अंदर ना, for instance, if you have, now you take the where you live, you know, Haryana. I used to live in Gurgaon many years ago, or not many years ago, actually 2015, and I've done a few stories for, you know, I write for the, I used to write for, I still write for the Lancet. You know, they have a section called the World Report. It's kind of for journalists, more like a more general kind of, you know, readership. So now Haryana is an affluent state, but again, its human development indicators, your nutrition, it's very bad. Now you would wonder why is that, and this is because just money by itself does not translate into better. You know, if a family is earning more money, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will be necessarily a healthier family. Everybody. It may be, but it may not be. And I'll tell you why it may not be. You know, you take Haryana as an example. Now, one of its big issues is, you know, the gender problem that they have, you know, the treatment of women. I mean, I think things have improved, but it used to be one of the worst places, you know, in terms of skewed child sex ratio. So it's what you spend money on. And I still remember going into a house not in the Gurgaon city but Gurgaon district, I think, in the sort of petty. It's a huge house, marble tiles, fancy television, you know, big cars, but the woman is the house is, you know, she is like, you know, you could see that she is doing all the housework, and she was pregnant. You know, I was doing actually a story on maternal health. Nobody is even bothered about when she eats. She's, you know, having, when you're pregnant, you have to take certain basic care of yourself. Nobody is taking care. She's making paratha and, you know, puri and all kinds of things for the whole huge family, you know. And she's eating last. She's not doing any of the stuff that she's supposed to do. She has no power. She has no, you know, she's sitting in a, you know, a little dingy kitchen. The rest of the house is beautiful, but not the kitchen, right? And she's eating her first meal. I asked her, and when I visited, when did first meal you have? You know, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. That's terrible. So I wouldn't be surprised if she has health problems, if she's anemic, if the child she gives birth to is low birth weight, all this kind of thing. But if you look at the absolute in terms of absolute income, no, this family was rich. So I think when you look at health, a lot of the times, जैसे आप कह रहे थे कि बाहर से जो दिखती है वो अंदर की कहानी और बाहर की कहानी में बहुत फर्क होता है. So you have to go into lots of other issues. Why do rich states have malnourished people? So then you have to go into, आपको पता है कि घर, it's not just a Haryana story. In many parts of India, जो औरत है, gender is a major factor in our low health indices, because the mother's health, like ultimately if you have a anemic mother, a malnourished mother, वो बच्चे भी low birth होंगे, which is the story in India. तो वो एकदम last में जाके खाते हैं, leftovers खाते हैं. Even our healthcare is not a big family priority. She has, in many parts, and again, I'm not saying no improvement has happened, lots of changes are happening, but even so, there are millions of women, in villages and also in the cities, who really have no power to negotiate anything. When will they get married? When will they have children? How many children? When they should go to a doctor? Yes, sab kuch, so it's a very patriarchal society. So for instance, so it's not just about money. So ultimately, all this will show up. So health is, what shall I say? It's a lens, through which you can actually study a society, and in a way, I think it's a kind of, it tells you the political priorities of a society.
बीच में आपने वेस्ट बंगाल के बारे में भी कुछ कहा था कि they have also managed a certain kind of development as well. Does West Bengal has a success story?
I don't think West Bengal has done very well in anything, but I would say that in some areas, again, it's, see, right now, it was West Bengal, again, depends on whether you call Kolkata. I think there are lots of changes which have taken place, but rural area, I mean, when the left was there was a lot of land reforms. I think this time during the COVID-19, I think West Bengal was good at evacuating people, for instance. So the number of deaths you saw, for instance, was, I think, far less than it what would have been. But and they've got a lot of government schemes, but I think personally, as a Bengalian, I come from there. I think West Bengal, the West Bengal middle class, the sort of, there's an educated middle class, but many of them left, right, during because there were no jobs. I think West Bengal can definitely do a lot more. It has done quite a lot in strengthening its foundation, because it has, it had historically certain advantages. And somehow I feel that, the human development story, I think it needs to stress a lot more. West Bengal also is one of the states where, there's been a lot of out migration. But if you go to Kolkata city, I mean, I think it's looking much better than many, before. But then Kolkata is not West Bengal, so there are a lot of states, like a lot of districts, like say Murshidabad and Malda, Purulia. I've been to many of these places, which are very, very poor, right? So it's again, what are you comparing with what? You can't compare apples and oranges. So yeah, I think that it can do a lot better also, though I think I do see some changes, positive changes.
Before we move forward, Patralika, do you want to take a break?
Yeah,
Want to go to
maybe
the
like a
washroom?
few minutes.
Okay. Welcome back, Patralika. Fun conversation going on. I mean, मैंने किसी के
Yeah, so
साथ
the
हर स्टेट डिस्कस कभी नहीं करा. That's so good.
इतने अभी डॉग्स भी इतने, देखिए हम इतनी सीरियस बातें बोल रहे हैं कि जो पहले हम डॉग्स जो बात कर रहे थे वो भी बंद कर दिया, चुपचाप वो भी सो गए हैं.
I know. और मुझे हमारी कॉन्वर्जेशन में सबसे अच्छी बात ये लगी कि अ, काफी चीजें जो हम विकास की जब बात करते हैं तो पॉपुलर नैरेटिव ऐसा लगता है कि ये पॉपुलर नैरेटिव सच का होते हैं नहीं होते, आप बहुत क्रिटिकल हो जाते हो बहुत बार, स्पेशली व्हेन यू आर इनटू दिस एरिया ऑफ हाईली पोलराइज्ड वर्ल्ड, और मतलब जहाँ पे पता नहीं रहता सच क्या है झूठ क्या है. तो ये आपसे बात करके समझ आया कि बहुत सारे पॉपुलर नैरेटिव सही भी हैं. मतलब अगर गुजरात की कोई डेवलपमेंट की बात हो रही है तो वो सही भी है, एट द सेम टाइम
हाँ,
केरला की भी डेवलपमेंट की बात हो रही है वो भी सही है. तो ये
देखिए
होता
सबके,
ये है कि बहुत.
हाँ, मिक्स्ड पिक्चर होते हैं. और आपको विकास, हम बहुत सारे आप कार्टून्स भी देखे होंगे. विकास कहाँ है, विकास कहाँ गया, विकास आ गया. there's been a whole lot of that thing around vikas. And I mean, many of my columns, there's been a word play on vikas. So vikas is this mythical vikas we are looking for. Who is vikas, where is vikas, what is vikas? And I think as a journalist, as a writer, I find कि एक जो बहुत प्रॉब्लम, जैसे मैंने आपको बोला पहले ही कि मैं पॉलिटिक्स के ऊपर, पार्टी पॉलिटिक्स, दैट इज नॉट माय मेजर एरिया, बट ऑफ कोर्स एवरीथिंग इज पॉलिटिकल इंक्लूडिंग हेल्थ एंड डेवलपमेंट. लेकिन अभी अभी इंडिया में, इट्स नॉट जस्ट इंडिया, इवन इन द यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स द सेम स्टोरी, कि इतने पॉलिटिकली पोलराइज्ड लैंडस्केप है कि इट इज रियली अ काइंड ऑफ, you know, us and them. अब ये विकास, अगर आप even if you say you write on विकास, you are willy nilly sucked into the political narrative. क्योंकि आप कुछ, अगर आप मान लीजिए कि आप उत्तर प्रदेश में गए और आपने कुछ चीज देखा कि जो सही नहीं है, ऐसे उत्तर प्रदेश में तो बहुत सारी चीजें मिलेंगे जो सही नहीं है. If you write that, then the people who support BJP or Yogi will say, oh, you must be this, you are obviously बहुत, आप मोदी जी के कुछ भी भला नहीं देख सकते हैं. If you write something
Unmarket
which,
gang.
yeah, yeah, that, speaking of which, my favorite bookstore just closed down in Khan Market, so I've been in state of mourning, the full circle cafe turtle wala. तो अगर कुछ अच्छे चीज आप लिखे, तो देन द अदर पीपल विल से आप मोदी जी के प्रेज कर रहे हैं. नो, इट्स अ वेरी अनफॉर्चुनेट सिचुएशन टू बी इन, बिकॉज नथिंग इज ब्लैक एंड व्हाइट, राइट नाउ. यस, having said that, I think in the last, say, 2-3 years, I think things have got even more polarized than before. Say the things were, say, in 2015 also. And I don't think that's a good thing, because what has happened, and which is definitely going to affect and is affecting the Vikas narrative, there's no trust. I know you didn't ask me a question on this, but I feel quite strongly on this. So I want to just spend a couple of seconds in talking about this. This trust has broken down. आप देखिए जो फेडरल हमारे, बिटवीन द सेंटर एंड स्टेट, स्पेशली द वंस रूल्ड बाय ऑपोजिशन, बिटवीन पीपल, बिटवीन कम्युनिटीज, and from my experience of covering healthcare, you need trust. Without trust, just the police, just लाठी से आप कोई भी health intervention नहीं कर सकते. I've written on this recently, I think a month ago or a couple of weeks ago, for one of the publications. क्या आप सुना होगा ये जो आशा वर्कर्स को पिटाई हुआ है? Have you read about it? In many places,
Yeah.
frontline workers, ASHA. Now, it's I mean, when I first read this, I was stunned, and then I realized that कि ये जो frontline, ये बिचारे, these are sort of village की बहू कहते हैं. Why would somebody attack them? They realize that it's because they are being used for COVID surveys. Contact tracing. घर घर में जाके पूछो कि ऐसे किसी का ये हुआ है, वो हुआ है, इसका आप कहाँ गए थे? And then this has come, in the back of NRC, the whole controversial citizenship amendments, the whole Hindu-Muslim tensions that we are seeing. So these people are kind of caught in the crossfire. If you go into some place and then somebody sees you as an agent of the government, they could take it out on you, and this is terrible. Nobody is going to tell you the truth if they feel themselves criminalized, or if they feel they're hunted down. So I think that, quite apart from everything else, the grand narratives of development, I think we need to bring back the trust. If people don't trust the government, the face of the government that they see, they're not going to, you're not going to just tell the truth. If you don't tell the truth, it's very, very difficult to tackle, say, especially in infectious diseases. What do you think? I mean, what's the situation like in Gurgaon?
देखिए, ज्यादा बाहर तो हम लोग गए नहीं है. बहुत ज्यादा केसेस भी सुनने को भी नहीं मिले हैं कि मतलब बहुत कुछ हाइपर केसेस हो रहे हैं. बट मैं गुड़गांव का हमेशा से ये कहता हूँ कि ये एक सिन सिटी है. यहाँ पे ना, यहाँ पे लॉलेस सिटी, यहाँ पे लॉ मुझे दिखता नहीं है. बहुत रेयरली मुझे लॉ दिखता है. तो मतलब भले वो मतलब लॉ एंड ऑर्डर बहुत ही कम दिखता है मुझे. तो मुझे कभी कोई बहुत सीरियसनेस और स्ट्रिक्टनेस नहीं दिखी, और ना मुझे कोई बहुत एक्स्ट्राऑर्डिनरी मेजर्स भी दिखे फ्रॉम गवर्नमेंट. इट्स मोर लाइक पीपल आर ऑन देयर ओन. और आपने जो ट्रस्ट की बात करी ना, वो तो मैं बहुत अग्री करता हूँ. और आई थिंक ये लोगों को रियलाइज करना चाहिए कि जो प्रो गवर्नमेंट है, उन लोगों का ट्रस्ट 120% है ऑन द गवर्नमेंट. और जो नहीं है, जो कि आई थिंक एक बहुत मेजर चंक बनता है हमारे देश का, उनका ट्रस्ट नेगेटिव में है कि मतलब कुछ अच्छा नहीं करेंगे और हो सकता है हमारे साथ बुरा भी करे. तो वो जो ट्रस्ट डेफिसिट है वो बहुत ह्यूज है, और वो कहीं पे कंसेंसस में अगर नहीं आता है तो वो आई थिंक मेरे को लगता है कि हेल्थ पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से जो आप कह रहे हैं, क्रॉस फायरिंग्स में
No, totally.
फ्रंटलाइन वर्कर्स जा रहे हैं।
एग्जैक्टली see, अब देखिए, अब मैंने HIV एड्स की एपिडेमिक शुरुआत से मैं कवर किया लेट अर्ली 90s से. One thing, if there's one lesson from the AIDS epidemic in India, it's that you stigmatization, fear-based messaging काम नहीं करता है.
करेक्ट.
Fear-based messaging does not work in public health. It has never worked. आप लाठी से नहीं कर सकते. तो अगर I mean, if you are going to make people who have the infection for whatever reason, make them feel guilty कि ये आपने अच्छा हुआ. एड्स के टाइम में I remember and everything that I've learned about HIV and AIDS is actually from people who are living with HIV and AIDS. मैं UN बहुत सारी एजेंसीज के कंसल्टेंसी भी किया, किताबें वगैरह भी लिखी इसके ऊपर. एड्स ऑफेंस वगैरह पे मैंने एक किताब लिखी थी बहुत साल पहले. उन्होंने अमर्त्य सेन ने उसको लॉन्च भी किया था. आई थिंक इट वाज 2009 और समथिंग. तो essentially the stigmatization, and मुझे याद है कि शुरू में जब ये AIDS, India has all these other taboo things, like we don't talk about sex, for instance, so many years went past when India was in a state of denial, about AIDS. तो वो तो बड़े बड़े जो हमारे जो एड्स मेडिकल एस्टेब्लिशमेंट के लोग हुआ करते थे, तो इंडिया ऑफिशियल पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू कि ये इधर एड्स हमारे देश में नहीं हो सकते क्योंकि हम सब भले आदमी है. वी नोबडी हैज एक्स्ट्रा मैरिटल सेक्स, नोबडी हैज, एवरीबडी इज वेरी वर्चुअस. ये अफ्रीका की बीमारी है, ये वेस्ट की बीमारी है, हमारे इधर नहीं हो सकते. So and it was sad because we lost almost a decade, before we actually realized that कि हम अलग से कोई नहीं है, we are as good or as bad as the others, and it was right with us. And then the stigmatization शुरू हुआ, and I still remember people, you say you cannot make people go and get tested if they think that if they get tested positive, they're going to be, stigmatized or harassed. And I remember one person who was, was living with HIV/AIDS, PL, what you call it. He told me कि वो कोई डॉक्टर के पास गए थे सरकारी अस्पताल में, तो वो जब भी उसकी टेस्ट के रिजल्ट हुआ, वो डॉक्टर चिल्ला चिल्ला के बोला, and like everybody else who had come and also heard it, कि मजा किया था ना, अब सजा हुआ. So I mean, sort of implying that, oh, you must have, visited a sex worker or something, and that's why. Now, whatever be the reason, if this is your approach, this is terrible, because his reaction was at that time, and even now there's no real medicine. Okay, you have ARV, I mean there's no vaccine or something, you have antiretrovirals which can definitely prolong, but that time that I'm talking about, there was not even any ARV which was affordable. That came much later, and actually India was one of the major players on bringing, making low cost affordable antiretrovirals. But the point I'm trying to say कि अभी भी आप कोविड के टाइम आप देख रहे हैं कि there is somewhere an attempt to kind of this fear based messaging, stigmatization. If you do that, nobody is going to come forward and say ki this is, nobody's going to tell the truth. If they don't tell the truth, they'll tell you all kinds of false stories, and people know how to sidestep anything. So this is going to be a problem. So I think trust is, it's a major part. I mean, you cannot, like, I recently I saw there was some sort of a I think some sort of a new law or something that they are saying, health workers, they ultimately are going to be held responsible if they have an infection. I think this is terrible, because we are seeing, they are working under extremely challenging situations. They not all of them have the PPE, as they say, the protective wear. And even if they have it, we don't know whether it's substandard or whether it's quality, what are their working hours, we don't know. You cannot blame people, I mean, I'm really against this blame gaming in the time of pandemic. People have to come together. They have to set aside their differences, because if they don't trust each other, if each one there's a lot of point scoring which we are seeing, it's not going to help. Things are going to totally spin out of control.
Absolutely. अच्छा, एक बात बताइए, ये आप इन द लास्ट 6 years आप गवर्नमेंट का मेडिकल पे फोकस और हेल्थ पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से कुछ सक्सेसेस हैं जो वो डेमोन्स्ट्रेट कर सकते हैं, और वेयर इज दिस गोइंग लार्जली? मतलब वो एक तो द मोस्ट टॉक्ड अबाउट इज आयुष्मान भारत, तो ये इसको आप सक्सेसफुल मानते हैं? क्योंकि उन्होंने आयुष्मान भारत का भी एक काफी स्ट्रॉन्ग नैरेटिव बनाया था इन देयर कैंपेन एज वेल, कि आयुष्मान भारत ने इतने करोड़ों लोगों को स्वच्छ भारत,
Also
हाँ
Swachh
स्वच्छ,
Bharat,
अच्छा
we
हाँ।
are.
हाँ ये तो दोनों दोनों चीजें हमको आई थिंक बात करनी चाहिए। स्वच्छ भारत का मैं इंदौर का बता सकता हूँ, बट इंदौर का बहुत लोकल इम्प्लीमेंटेशन था। वो एक चार्ज अप नगर पालिका थी और वो लोकल लीडरशिप थी जिसने कुछ एक मैसिव टर्न अराउंड करा।
Hmm.
बट मुझे मेरे पास
Hmm.
और वो हर साल स्वच्छ भारत की लिस्ट तो आती है जिसमें वो 10 15
Hmm.
20 शहर रहते हैं जो बहुत अच्छा कर रहे होते हैं। बट हाँ, वी कैन
Hmm.
स्टार्ट विद
Hmm.
स्वच्छ भारत एंड आयुष्मान भारत, एंड आई वुड लव टू नो आप क्या, आपको क्या लगता है उनके बारे में, और एनीथिंग एल्स।
देखिए, as you know, everything that we discuss, including Swachh Bharat, Ayushman Bharat. This is part of the polarizing discourse that we have in India at the moment, and it's not just about Mr. Modi or not Mr. Modi. It's also the way you look at things. Now, for instance, if you talk to the whole health community itself is divided, on say the Ayushman Bharat, and it gets down to a basic division on whether you believe in the insurance model or whether you believe in universal health care, which means that it should be free. So there is a fundamental divide, and you could sort of argue both ways. Now, Ayushman Bharat, in I think, I'm not saying that nobody has benefited. And again, Ayushman Bharat ke andar bhi, the PMJAY, that is the one component which everybody knows about, right? But not there is the other component about health and wellness center. I mean, I personally think, because PMJ is basically talking about hospitalization, but we must also
ये क्या
know
है
that
पीएमजे?
the prime minister's what Jan Arogya Yojana, जो main जो है उसका the आयुष्मान भारत की आयुष्मान भारत प्रधानमंत्री जन आरोग्य योजना, ABPMJAY, which during it's been talked about a lot. It is the insurance model, and it is for the bottom, the poorest people, but it is hospitalization. Now, if you talk to people, most of their health expenses is not necessarily in the hospital. That's something which we must understand. Ki chote mote, unless you are hospitalized, and you have a surgery or something, you will not be able to benefit from this. I personally think that the other component of Aishman Bharat, which is the Health and Wellness Center, would have probably seen that HWC, जो कहते हैं, मैं कुछ हेल्थ वेलनेस सेंटर्स को विजिट भी कर चुकी हूँ. The plan is some 150,000 sub health centers, primary health centers, urban primary health centers. They're supposed to be transformed into these health and wellness centers by 2022. एंड अभी मैंने देखा कि पोर्टल में जो ऑफिशियली जो कह रहे हैं कि अबाउट 40,557 एक्चुअली कर चुके हैं. नाउ I think that we should again, surgery, tertiary. Of course, you need it, and we have people going into debt. I mean, huge, health debt, healthcare related debt, and to that extent, I think Ayushman Bharat has definitely helped in for some people, but it can't be the main solution till you actually revamp the primary health center, because otherwise what will happen is, you could actually land up making surgery very sexy. I mean, for every chote mote cheese, you don't need to come to AIMS, or you don't need to go to a fancy hospital and get an operation done. So if you do not strengthen the primary health centers, I mean, I personally think that to really and I think the agenda is, that they say that they'll give comprehensive health care in these health and wellness centers. That should be good, but this component A has received much less attention and also much less resources. And of course, then there is the other big issue, the elephant in the room. It's not just about the buildings, just like education is not just about the school building, it's also about the teachers and everything else. Health is not just about just the buildings and the hardware. It's also, and we have an acute shortage of health, human resources in this, doctors, nurses, everything. Within that, again, we have massive inequity in the sense ki whatever. Firstly, we have far less allopathic doctors than say we should, and then within that again, we have most of them are in kind of focused more on the cities. So there's a huge difference between the rural and the urban areas. And of course, India as a country spends, both center and state together, spends far too little on health, about I think 1.28% of the GDP. And it's kind of stagnating, I mean, despite all the, I mean, one thing is Mr. Modi has made health a big talking point, and it is, it has been talked about during elections. But again, I think in the implementation, when you go to the ground, I mean, we were going to also talk about Swachh Bharat. I've also covered the previous, its previous UPA के time में इसको निर्मल भारत कहा जाता था, निर्मल भारत अभियान. Swachh Bharat Abhiyan was a very ambitious scheme of the government, and I think it's a good idea, definitely, and definitely many toilets have been built. But just building mass construction of toilets is only one part of the story. You're not going to necessarily have health and hygiene with just the building of the toilets. It did not happen before, it's not going to happen now. So you have to see that they're maintained properly, you have to see that there's water, you have to see that the waste disposal, now those areas, it's getting far less attention. So while I think Mr. Modi and the party deserves, definitely, for making it into a talking point, and also building these toilets, I think there's much more to do. So, for instance, open defecation. I mean, I even when we were saying that open defecation has happened, I just went to just a few hundred kilometers from Delhi, just a couple of hours journey, and saw in places in Uttar Pradesh, villages where they didn't have toilets, or if they had toilets, they didn't have water. Many of them were people were easing themselves out in the open. So I think sometimes the big announcements, the mega narrative, and the ground reality, there's huge gap. And even most recently, I've been doing some writing on the Amphan and the cyclones. I was talking to people in the Amphan affected areas in Sundarban and South 24 Parganas and North 24 Parganas in Bengal, and they were saying that many of these toilets and also houses which were built under various schemes, I think Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, they had asbestos and tin roof. Now come the cyclone, they all blew away. So what's happening? Toilets without roofs and all that, toilets which are totally destroyed, and they're out in the defecating out in the open. Of course, the state government and I think the central team also went recently. They've given some money for repair. So the point is that just construction by itself, you need it, but you have to go beyond that. Just because you have a toilet doesn't mean it's being used. Just that everybody is using it. So yeah, I mean it's a much more complex story than what the promos or the ads make it out to be. I don't know, what is your understanding?
मैं ना थोड़ा सा मैं कुछ कंसेंसस पे पहुंच नहीं पाया रहा था, क्योंकि मैं आयुष्मान भारत वाला जो आइडिया है वो अच्छा तो लगता था कि आपको सस्ते में इंश्योरेंस मिल रहा है एंड देन यू कैन एक्सेस द हॉस्पिटल्स, बट उसका फ्लिप साइड जब मुझे पता चलता था कि हॉस्पिटल्स में लोगों को एडमिट नहीं करा जा रहा है अगर उनके पास आयुष्मान भारत कार्ड है, तो मतलब द प्राइवेट हॉस्पिटल्स आर आल्सो नॉट कोपिंग, क्योंकि शायद दे वरी कि शायद सरकार से उनको रिम्बर्समेंट नहीं मिलेगी, या देयर इज सम लीकेजेस देयर। और तो वो और ना कोई मेरे को बहुत अच्छी रिसर्च मिली जो बता सके कि आयुष्मान भारत के गैप्स किधर है। और जैसा कि अगर आपने कहा कि पॉलिटिकल डिस्कोर्स जो पोलराइज्ड है, तो अगर आप गैप्स निकालने भी जाओ तो वो भी दैट बिकम्स अ होल डिफरेंट narrative altogether.
Yeah, I mean, the moment, I mean, that is supposed to be the argument for the universal health care. The moment you start saying this person can get it, but not this person, the moment you start getting into that, a lot of people, and you see, Ayushman Bharat hasn't, as far as I know, there hasn't been a comprehensive independent evaluation. But इनके जो previous एक scheme थी RSBY, वो भी insurance based. Now, in India, we must also हमारे जो लोग हैं, it's gaming the system. I mean, I remember, this is again not Ayushman Bharat, but इनके पहले वो यूपीए के टाइम में एक स्कीम हुआ करता था RSBY, which was actually a labor ministry scheme. And उस time वो Ayushman Bharat is of course much more money, but that was only $30,000. And again, it was for the poor people, and you can go and get. You didn't have to pay. तो मैंने दिल्ली, I mean, not even you don't have to go to some remote village. दिल्ली के जो हमारी जो urban village है, I forget, somewhere nothing, Tigri, somewhere, not too far from where I stay in South. तो मैंने घर पे गई, तो I talked to a family which had, it had that card and everything. So I said, तो आपको free, you are also dealing with many millions of people who are completely uneducated, remember. Just trying to imagine an uneducated or illiterate person going into a hospital, and if the hospital is going to, let's say, exploit them, you can see how. So मैंने इनको पूछा कि आपने कुछ पैसा कुछ जेब से कुछ खर्चा हुआ? सो ही सेड हाँ 12,000। तो किस लिए? आपको तो ये सब फ्री होना था। सो शी सेड दिस लेडी सेड कि नहीं ये सब तो कुछ चीजें तो फ्री थी लेकिन उसके पहले कुछ टेस्ट करवा लिया तो वो बोला कि वो सब इसमें इंक्लूडेड नहीं है, तो उसके लिए 12,000 ले लिया। तो ऐसे तो आपको ये सब टेस्ट जरूरी थी? So she said, "Oh, how do I know? मैं तो पढ़े लिखे नहीं हूँ। अब ये टेस्ट जरूरी है कि नहीं?" Now, the test they have, this hospital was a private hospital recommended for this poor woman's husband. This was not among the list of procedures which was included in this RSBY. तो I said, तो आपको तो ये तो जरूरी भी नहीं है आपकी जो बीमारी से कोई मतलब इसका कुछ लिंक भी नहीं है। So then I asked her, "Do you have receipts?" उनके पास कुछ रिसीट भी नहीं है। So she didn't even know कि अगर आप अस्पताल में जाते हैं कि आपके एक हक बनता है, वी वर टॉकिंग अबाउट राइट्स कॉन्शियसनेस अर्लियर, कि ये जो रिसीट या इसका डिटेल्स मेडिकल रिकॉर्ड्स कुछ भी नहीं है। So she said कि ऐसे भी होता है. So she said she didn't even have a concept of receipts because her husband used to have a local kind of a kirana store, in this urban village, Laldora kind of place. She told me कि हम तो अंडा ब्रेड वगैरह बेचते हैं, हम तो रिसीट देते भी नहीं किसी को, कोई हमसे मांगते भी नहीं है. So I'm just saying that when we have this discussion, it's one thing to look at it in the middle class, perspective, and quite another to see it, in the context of the kind of people that I'm describing. I'm talking about Delhi. So, if you go to a remote village in UP or Bihar or Jharkhand, you can imagine ki, it's quite easy to exploit people, and there are rampant medical malpractice. On top of that, our private sector, private sector, I'm not against private sector per se, but we have a very unregulated private sector when it comes to healthcare. Then हमारी जो बहुत सारे acts वगैरह है, clinical establishment act, तो आधे तो वो implemented नहीं होते हैं. So essentially, if you are as a patient, if you go there, you're actually, you're quite vulnerable. And as we are seeing, even as we speak, even in a city like Delhi, every day, if you're on Twitter, you will see somebody or the other saying, "हम अस्पताल में गए, अब bed नहीं है." Like the chief minister saying there are enough beds. It's very difficult to know what is the truth. Chief minister actually went on record just saying कि black market कर रहे हैं. No, it's very difficult to make out what exactly is happening, and what is our recourse. Forget about the politics. As a if अगर मुझे अब दिल्ली में वो सबको ना ये कॉन्टैक्ट्स ढूंढो, तो अब मान लीजिए कि ऐसे बहुत सारे लोग होते हैं कि किसी का कोई कॉन्टैक्ट्स नहीं है, तो वो लोग बेचारी क्या करेंगे? I've met so many people, you meet them, on the pavement outside AIMS, when I go to villages, I travel quite a bit. I mean, abhi nahi, but normally. You meet people, the information gap. उनको पता नहीं है. तो ऐसे बहुत सारे स्कीम्स भी होते होंगे सरकार, लेकिन उनको पता नहीं है कि कहाँ जाना है, क्या करना है, कौन सी फॉर्म भरना है. Then there will be the middlemen who will come. So I'm just saying that there are a lot of these issues. I mean, when we say that there's some, scheme, तो announcement तो कोई भी कुछ भी announce हम कर सकते हैं, लेकिन उनकी जो grassroots implementation है, that will vary from state to state. How strong are your institutions over there? How alert are the people? How close is the government to the citizen? तो इस बहुत सारे factors है. So the implementation will vary.
हाँ, वो ग्राउंड रियलिटी पता करना तो दिल्ली का आपने बहुत से एग्जांपल दिया कि मैं ट्विटर पे देख रहा हूँ, कोई बोल रहा है कि दिल्ली में टेस्ट नहीं हो रहे, बेड नहीं है, और फिर मनोज सिसोदिया बोल रहे हैं और अरविंद केजरीवाल बोल रहे हैं कि नहीं वो तो सब कुछ चल रहा है, अच्छे से चल रहा है सब कुछ, एंड देयर इज नो प्रॉब्लम एंड वी आर टेकिंग केयर ऑफ एवरीथिंग. तो बड़ा ही कॉन्फ्लिक्टिंग हो जाता है.
No, because in the app, they are saying, they are claiming, the Delhi government is that, this many beds are available. Now, people are saying that those hospitals say that they don't have the beds. Now, that's several possibilities. One is, there are beds, but maybe they're not enough medical people. Right? So the hospitals don't want to kind of, or they're not updating. So you don't, what is showing in the apps may not be what is reality. Or they have the beds, but they don't want to give it because nobody wants, a death in their hospital. Or maybe the government also doesn't want. Or they don't have medical staff. And I don't mean just doctors, but, the nurses and things like that. They don't want to take in, you can't suddenly go on a mass hiring spree in the middle of the pandemic. Where are you going to get people? So maybe they just don't have the, the because pandemic is a something which nobody could prepare for. Maybe they don't have the health staff to be able to cope with this extra load, or or hospitals, which is what the Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal is saying, that maybe they just want to sell it, like we see in schools and all that, to the highest bidder. वो बेड है लेकिन वो अगर पैसा नहीं दोगे, because I'm also reading a lot of these kind of stories कि वो पैसे मांग रहे हैं या पैसे दे रहे हैं. So we don't know. I mean, sitting at home, it's impossible to make out, what exactly the situation. But I mean, as just an ordinary person, and again, I don't think this is unique to Delhi, because I'm reading the identical stories, in Mumbai, for instance. I think people are just scared. I mean, if I want to get some tests done, something else, not even COVID, kahan मैं जाऊं, because they are, they would want a COVID negative certificate. वो test kahan करे, वो bed मिलेगा कि नहीं, and maybe I'll contract the infection, because there is such a large number of people, health workers and doctors. I mean, it's quite frightening to see some more than 400 people in AIMS, and not just health workers and doctors, but even security guards who've got, who have been diagnosed COVID positive. So I think this state of uncertainty somewhere, I think different levels of government and all. I think there's not much coordination. There's a lot of point scoring. People are not coming out with the truth, and us, people like us. I mean, it puts us at irrespective of whatever battles, the higher level battles we fought. I mean, we are ultimately the ones who are going to be, paying for it.
एंड मेरा मेरा बिलीफ जो यूनिवर्सल हेल्थ केयर में था वो तो इस पैंडेमिक के बाद और ही स्ट्रांग हो गया. इनफैक्ट एपिसोड 3 में मैंने डॉक्टर अमित गुप्ता से कॉन्वर्सेशन करी.
हाँ.
वो यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ ऑक्सफोर्ड में
Yeah,
है
yeah,
और
yeah,
वहाँ
yeah.
पे वो वहाँ
Neonatologist.
पे हाँ हाँ, यू नो हिम.
I think we follow each other on Twitter.
ओह यस यस, तो उनके साथ कॉन्वर्सेशन करी मैंने. तो आई मीन, एंड वी डिस्कस्ड अबाउट यूनिवर्सल हेल्थ केयर. पर मेरा हमेशा से ये रहा, और आई थिंक ये बात बहुत सही है कि ना, एक को अगर हम बोल रहे हैं कि इलाज या हेल्थ जो है या स्वास्थ्य जो है वो बेसिक राइट है, वो राइट्स में आता है और बेसिक्स है, तो उसका तो एक्सेस देखिए सभी को होना चाहिए, इरिस्पेक्टिव ऑफ उसके पैसे क्या है क्या नहीं है, कौन से क्लास से आ रहा है, जात से आ रहा है, जेंडर क्या है, वो आई थिंक वो मैटर नहीं करता है. हमारी जैसे कंट्री में आई थिंक द क्वेश्चन दैट वी शुड बी आस्किंग इज कि यूनिवर्सल हेल्थ केयर को रोड मैप क्या होगा. और आई थिंक वो कहीं पे वो कॉन्वर्जेशन नजर नहीं आ रही है, और ये कॉन्वर्जेशन सिर्फ एक लिबरल सेक्शन के बीच में रह के चली गई है. इनफैक्ट मेरे हिसाब से तो कोई मेजर पॉलिटिकल पार्टी except maybe Aam Aadmi Party or maybe some parties like CPI in Kerala, not really टॉकिंग अबाउट कि यूनिवर्सल हेल्थ केयर दिखेगा कैसे, क्या सेंट्रली ड्रिवन होगा, क्या स्टेट ड्राइव करेंगी, स्टेट्स के पास फंड कैसे आएगा, और पहला, और मेरे दिमाग में तो समझ नहीं था कि वो हॉस्पिटल कैसा होगा. वो पहला, विल दे मेक वन हॉस्पिटल इन ईच डिस्ट्रिक्ट, और हाउ विल इट वर्क? डू यू हैव एनी आइडिया अबाउट इट कि इंडियन कॉन्टेक्स्ट में वो कैसे इम्प्लीमेंट होगा?
See, I think the current government, I think, does not really subscribe to the rights narrative. The late Arun Jaitley, I remember asking him at a press conference, and he was very skeptical, of the rights approach, because I mean, to me, I completely agree with you. To me, it's very, very basic. I mean, and I've done books and all on the, maternal health and child health, and it's shocking to think that a woman could die simply because she didn't have the money, or in childbirth, or somebody could actually die. It just seems, it's a horrific thing. But there are actually, sadly, I mean, it's like in the United States. This is the one thing I've never understood about United States. They don't actually believe in I mean, United States has one of the worst healthcare systems, because if you're not covered by insurance and everything, the healthcare is so expensive. Unlike, say, Europe or UK or Canada, they don't believe in that. It's an ideological thing. So which means in a country like India, what would happen is, if you're going to say that people would have to pay for it, something, people are not, I mean, sadly, there are millions and millions of people who are even below the poverty line. The moment you say that you have to pay for this, even if it's a nominal amount, people won't, they just won't seek healthcare, so that's why, and the thing is, in terms of the modalities, I think, I mean, previous government, UPA government, I think they had this huge high level, committee, and they brought out this whole thing on universal healthcare, the big committee. But this government, believes in the insurance model, and they've been plugging that. They've been talking a lot about public private partnership. Now this is a buzzword, public private partnership. It sounds good, but again, how does it work? Which is the independent evaluation of this public private partnership? And if you're going to say that, okay, the government will pay, the private sector will, as we are seeing in the pandemic, when it comes to a real crisis, the private sector basically wants the government to do most of the work, right? So they private sector by definition is a for-profit sector. If and we have, as I said, an unregulated private sector. So before we attempt any kind of roadmap, I think we have to bring people under some kind of regulations. Because if you're going to say that we don't believe in following, any regulations, or even if you have those things, it's not going to be really implemented, there is a problem, and the affordability is a problem. So I think these are some of these are ideological issues, because India, on one hand, we have all these healthcare issues, huge burden of diseases and millions of people with infectious disease. Also, I mean, we have this twin challenge, right? Lifestyle diseases, what we call non-communicable diseases like hypertension, all these things, and the communicable diseases, which are basically the traditional developing country diseases. So we actually have first world diseases as well as developing country diseases all together, and without the necessary, and with a terribly under resourced and overstretched public healthcare system. But I mean, before you go somewhere, there has to be some common understanding of who's going to do what. So for instance, primary healthcare, who's going to do it? Is the private sector willing to go to remote villages and do it things, or without charging money? So I think it's not very clear, and we have a healthcare industry which is doing very well. So those are these super specialty hospitals and things like that. So a lot of the setting up, I think, of super specialty hospitals is, of course, it's good, but I am not sure how that helps the big chunk of the healthcare story, which is about primary healthcare. And it isn't at all clear. I mean, this government says it wants public private partnership. I think it has said that many times. It is not at all clear which private sector entities would like to go into villages and places where where there are no approach roads and all that. Who's going to go there? And then, so they, if they land up being in the big cities and places where it's easy to access, then it's again reinforcing the same imbalance that we already have. So yeah, well, NGOs could do it, but I personally think that as far as healthcare is concerned, I think the state would have to be in the main. It doesn't mean that the private sector, NGOs, or community doesn't have any role, but I think the state has to do the major lifting. I mean, you can't outsource this to, as we are seeing in during the pandemic, private sector. If you left everything to private sector, I mean, what would happen, right? I mean, we are seeing, even in big cities, private sector saying no bed, no bed, what to do. So I mean, I think this is very fundamental, and I think even for an economic success story, I mean, as I grow older, my biggest fear is, oh my God, who now, I'm a self-employed person. My biggest fear is, oh, as I grow older, who's going to pay for my healthcare? It's going to be me myself, right? And then you start economizing. Oh, okay, do I really need to get all these tests done? I'm not talking only about myself, but there are lots of people like me. So I think, and this is not true of many other countries. I mean, you don't even have to go to Europe or something. You go to places like Thailand, Sri Lanka, they have a much more, closer to a universal healthcare model. I mean, they have private sector, but I think it's a much more equitable model. So I think that fear of falling sick, what will I do? I don't want to go bankrupt. If you have elderly people in the in the family, I think this should be a major political priority.
आप बात कर रहे थे कुछ some different countries, Thailand, Sri Lanka, and and some South Asian countries as well. तो India क्या learn कर सकता है from these, some of the miracle economies? And do you have, if you have to recommend, what path should we take? And I'm not just talking about a health point of view. I'm talking about a
Hmm.
development मॉडल. कौन सा हमारा डेवलपमेंट मॉडल एज पर यू कैसा होना चाहिए? शुड वी फॉलो कुछ सिंगापुर जैसा होना चाहिए, या शुड वी इट्स मोर लाइक चाइना ड्रिवन? एंड इट्स अ लिटिल क्वेश्चन ऑफ इकोनॉमिक्स आल्सो कि मे बी व्हाट विल फोकस मोर ऑन मैन्युफैक्चरिंग. व्हाट इज योर सेंस, मतलब फ्रॉम व्हाट यू हैव स्टडीड?
देखिए, it's also at what position, East Asian success story, or even the China success story. I don't know whether you can repeat identically, because we are now at a different situation, right? Different state. Like China was able to ride the manufacturing, the whole became the manufacturing hub of the world. But now, with more automation, whether we can even if we wanted to, hypothetically, whether we can repeat that exact same story, I'm not sure. And again, India as a whole, it depends on, each state would. I mean, you could always learn elements, different elements. But I think one thing fundamentally about the Asian, Singapore. Yeah, I mean, Singapore. By the way, the state is in a even though it's a totally capitalistic market economy. The state is in a very plays a very central role in Singapore's development. And in fact, once during visit to Singapore, I went to one of their museums, and when they were showing how they transformed themselves from a marshy swamp to what it is. But you can't compare Singapore with India, because Singapore is just some 3 million, 4 million people. I mean, this is, I think, a fraction of just one city in India. But if you look at East Asia on the whole, yes, I think there are some things to learn. In the sense that, again, health and education, I would say that these are major things, but these are not the only factors. It's rapid growth. East Asia, it began with an educational advantage over other developing economy, but they sustained that advantage through explicit policies, investing in basic education. So, for instance, if you want to be, I keep hearing this bit about global supply chain. One of the fundamental things about a global supply chain is skilled manpower, which can also learn new skills. Right now, for that, you know you have to have a very strong base of primary and secondary education. These all these countries that we're talking about, East Asia, Singapore, Taiwan, South Korea, Thailand, many of these places, they have, you have a base. And then in the 1960s, then compared to, let's say, South Asia. But after that also, in the 80s, they focused their public spending, focused a lot on primary and secondary education, also healthcare. I think some of these countries, Indonesia, Korea, Thailand, I think devoted more than 80% of the education budget on basic education. See, in our country now, our enrollment ratio is going up, which means, more people are entering school. But we still have this problem of quality of learning. If you listen to, this ASA reports and Pratham, which they're telling you about the learning annual status of education, survey. So it's telling you the actual. It's not about whether a child is in class 3 or class 4, but what is the state of learning. And then many of them drop out. So you can't have that if you're talking. And then, of course, when you have a more educated population, declining fertility, all this is part of the story, which has happened in the south, in Kerala and places like this. That is the other thing, big difference with the north. The higher the education, the lower the fertility rate, and the population, it's a contraceptive by itself, like we know this. So I think we have to have a mix. I mean, I wouldn't say that you don't need the other infrastructure, which we, right in the beginning, we discussed about, roads and basic infrastructure, airports, the things. You definitely need them. I wouldn't say that you don't need them, because roads, for instance, without roads, you can't go. I mean, mobility, right? But alongside the human resources, we have to, and it's not just quantities, as I said, the quality of the human, because I've been hearing about this skill development mission, but you must have also read these stories which keep coming out, that sometimes even MBAs, and they can't, they sort of are going for peon's job and things like that. That you might have got a degree, but your actual employability is very poor, because you don't really have any real skills which the market wants. So I think the base has to be a good level of education, which also includes numeracy skills. So up to, let's say, class 12 should be very solid. And right now, that solid education is only mostly, I mean, there are some differences, there are some exceptions, but mostly it's for people who can afford very good quality, private schools. That should not be the case, because if you have that model, which we've been having up till now, you're going to only have a small section of people, who will do well, because they can build on their advantages. But you will not be able to. I don't know. I mean, did you study here in Gurgaon, or where did you study?
Indore.
Indore. So I don't know what is your experience that, did you meet people who might have got a lot of degrees, but, as I say, for instance, if you were running a company, you wouldn't hire them simply because they don't have any basic understanding, of many things. So it's essentially, we also have a rote learning model, right? So you could possibly get some degree from somewhere, but you don't have analytical skills, you don't have critical thinking skills, which I think is going to become more and more, important. I mean, I've spent some time, outside India, in UK and France, and I think, outside India, I think these are the skills they really focus on. It's not just facts. It's not just, I'm just giving an example. India became independent in 1947. It's not just dates, or it's not just names. It's the ability to think independently. I think somehow our education system doesn't encourage that. There's a lot of, blind, kind of, rote learning. And then also, the absolute basic, qualities also seems to be missing in for vast number of, people. So I would say there's one thing to learn from the Asian miracle, economies, quite apart from following market friendly policies, which I believe in, infrastructure, etc. Invest in your people, invest in your people. So, because, tomorrow's the world of work is changing, as we know, right? So if you even to pick up new skills, we talk big about artificial intelligence, this, that. How are you going to do all that if you dropped out of, school in class 4 or class 5, or if you can't even add, two numbers, together? Without that, and it's not enough for just the upper middle class to do that, right? So I think the emphasis on human capital, and these are not leftist countries. None of these countries that we talked about, the Asia's, none of these are leftist countries. There's not really a left-right debate. The so-called Asia's tiger economies are all great believers in the market. I think their ability to, they were export driven. Their ability to adapt to the external, environment as it changed, I think, had a lot to do with, their focus on human capital from a very strategic point of view, non-ideological point of view. I mean, just a little aside. Every time I visit a city in any country, I go into their public library, and Singapore, Hong Kong, all these places, it's amazing. The quality of public libraries. I remember many, many years ago, I was actually on a family vacation in Hong Kong. And I was amazed to see entire families have piled on to, they've gone into a public library. They've sort of booked little cubicles. It's all free. And everybody's doing something, like, it's like, and they also have cafes and things all around. So it's a very pleasant situation in the weekend. So the kids are doing math homework, and, the father and the mother also maybe reading some magazine or something. In between, somebody gets up and, goes for a stroll and has coffee. And it's like 3 hours they're going to spend. So they make it a very enjoyable experience. I mean, the point is that, they realize the strategic value, of investing in education. So that's what I mean. In basics, like, you don't have to have like millions and millions of PhDs, but you at least have to have everybody in the population with a basic minimum education, and by which I don't mean just a degree, because there are lots of people who even cheat, but a quality, actual learning.
Hmm. That's a very good example, by the way. I one thing which, again, it's a little political question. One thing which I could not understand is that, 70 years plus since independence, our hospitals, I mean, the ones that the government hospitals, they're still in a mess. I could not find, I mean, we do have a lot of government hospitals, which are run by state, and, some state and center shared, but they're still not the best ones, and that is what my makes my belief in universal healthcare pretty weak. I feel कि, वो गवर्नमेंट उसमें इन्वॉल्व होगी तो वो डिलीवर नहीं कर पाएगी। मतलब हर कोई, हर हमारे पास सरकारी अस्पताल तो बहुत है इस शहर में, कंट्री में, पर हर कोई एम्स नहीं है, एम्स तो एक ही है। तो
No, now you have
that
more
is
than
also,
AIMS. You have AIMS, they're all over the place, but there are varying quantities. I don't know whether Indore has an AIMS, but I know Bhopal has an AIMS.
no,
Not
Bhopal has an AIMS, I think, and I mean AIMS. See that's the thing. AIMS is not just the name, right? I mean they've set up AIMS all over the place. But I remember going to the Rai Bareli AIMS some I think last year, एंड वो उसमें बहुत कुछ नहीं है दे जस्ट ऐसे ही बोला एम्स वो अंदर में घुसने भी नहीं दिया वो चौकीदार बोला इनके सारे स्टाफ चंडीगढ़ ना कहाँ से आए थे आई डोंट नो फ्रॉम वेयर दे हैड कम बट दे वांट फ्रॉम द थिंग एंड दे डिडंट इवन अलाउ मी इनसाइड एंड आई वाज वंडरिंग व्हाई शुड अ पब्लिक हॉस्पिटल deny entry to somebody unless they have something to hide. No, I mean, the main thing you have to understand is that, our government hospitals, massively under resourced and overstretched, and everybody comes to these places because we haven't developed our primary health infrastructure properly. So jojo it's just too much, and because it's free. So I mean, it's a kind of aims maybe the number of people you would have seen waiting outside in the sleeping on pavements and things like that. Now they wouldn't come if they had. I mean, why should you come from Bihar and UP and wherever to AIMS in Delhi if you had good? So I think it's again boils down to you never developed your primary health center. So there is and everybody cannot afford private hospitals. Private hospitals can clean you out. So yes, so while we have super corporate hospitals, it's a question of, yes, the quality of you will get according to your ability to pay. And I mean, if you are not covered, I mean, if somebody says, pay 12 lakhs, 13 lakhs, you don't have the money, then you don't. So I think which is a very iniquitous model, because then, whether you live or die really depends on, how deep your pocket is. I mean, it all, I think, boils down to we spend too little on health. I mean, just about, as I said, just a little over 1.2%, of the GDP. And our health indicators, our health record in healthcare, everybody praises us for our impressive economic success since the 90s. But I don't think we are. Yes, we have had some success, like we eliminated polio, and our health indicators are improving a little bit. But compared to our economic progress, nothing like it. So I think it's because spending on health is really whether it's at the state level, and healthcare is actually a state subject mostly. So two-thirds of the country's public health spend is coming from the states. That's also state stagnant. So you will get what you spend, right? If you don't spend, you won't get. That's what it is.
A final segment, Patralekha, and then I think we have been on for 2 hours and more. I just wanted your quick thoughts. What are the weak spots that COVID has exposed about our country, and what is a road ahead?
Well, I think I talked about it a little bit in the right at the start. I mean, to me, the COVID, and of course we were totally unprepared, but so was most of the world. So that's something. But I think it was a kind of sluggish response and expecting things to just work out on its own. We were, something very very basic which has been written about. We talk about it's also a political issue. We talk about our healthcare industry and medicines, and how there's a rush for vaccines and all kinds of things. There's a parallel discourse going on, right, apart alongside all our other problems. But did you know that Indian medicines are completely or almost very significantly dependent on what we call APIs, active pharmaceutical ingredients in China? So I mean, I think the lack of, and then it's only PPEs in so many things we're totally hostage, to import. We don't make it, and it's not even that we can suddenly start making it in large number. The basic ingredients are not there. So I'm just saying this is something I think it is taught us that we talk a lot about Pakistan being at our borders or China being, but security is not just about military. It's also something like health security. I mean, and that's where I would kind of agree with the Atmanirbhar slogan, though I don't really think we should be completely Atmanirbhar in every other way, because we are part of the global thing. But I think we should have a strategic vision. I think the other thing the COVID and the lockdown has exposed is again the whole the whole informal sector. The fact that this is 80% of our workforce, we never thought about these people. They never had any health care, nothing. They were cooped up. And suddenly, these people were out on the streets marching. Now, it's all very well to tell them, oh, no, no, stay put, but they don't have jobs. What are they supposed to do? We didn't really care because it didn't affect us. Okay, you go and buy a flat or you rent a flat. You'd really, most of us, like middle class, I'm talking about people like you and me, we never really went into questions like, oh, what is the state? What is the quality of life? Or how do the construction workers live? Now, I think we are being forced to face many of these questions, that these people, there are these millions and millions, there's these people without the basic minimum thing. They can, if you don't take care of them at all, they can actually bring the country to its knees. So we need to, these people need to be looked after, and basic minimum stuff should be given to them, facilities, and also wages, I think, for because as I said, I don't think you can be really productive if you're sickly and not given basic facilities. And they're also Indian citizens, they're fellow Indian citizens. I mean, the way, this after so much of halla gulla, we had these Shramik trains. But I mean, you must have been also reading about, the deaths on the way. I mean, this is horrible. This is horrible. I don't think in any other country, yes, this came as a big surprise to every country, but I don't think we've had this sort of situation in any other country. I mean, I was just thinking the other day, and I was asking somebody, I think in the US, New York Times or one of the papers, they brought out one whole page of the names of every single person who's died, of COVID. And they dedicated, they had the names and, who the person was, the address. And I was thinking, do we even have that figure? Does even any government agency, like if you were to ask, if somebody were to actually wanting to have a huge wallpaper or a front page of a newspaper or several pages of a newspapers with all the people who are dead, I don't even know what is the latest death toll, but probably, I don't know, what is the latest death toll? It's above 5,000, right? Or is it 6,000? Or what is it now?
I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, definitely above 5,000. I think it's probably close to. I mean, it's as we speak, it's just changing. If we wanted these 6,000, I don't think anybody has that, and this is just a reflection of how we treat people. I mean, there are lots of these people, who would have just died, and nobody would. They wouldn't even be part of any kind of documentation. So I think it's exposed that, and I mean, though I think it's, I mean, everybody is talking about migrants, 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 how terrible informal sector. But these migrants and this informal sector, as I said, right in the beginning, they didn't come from Mars, they were always there. We just didn't notice them, right? It's only when they started marching, and when they died, in a long route of starvation and fatigue and hunger, that we kind of noticed these are our own people. And I think you don't have to be left wing or anything to just say that a basics, just the basic minimum and human dignity to fellow Indians. I mean, this is the least that we could do for. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not a terrible optimist. I hope the optimist in me says that, I hope that with so much of now, coverage of these issues, that some things will change, some basic facilities, some more thinking, about these people who are 80% of our workforce. But on the other hand, the pessimist in me says that, yeah, the change will probably come, but it will be still very slow and gradual. I don't know what your thoughts are on this.
Well, I'm young, so I'm hopeful.
How old are you, by the way? I never asked. It's an embarrassing question, but just.
I will turn 28 in this month of June.
Oh my God! Yeah, I mean, I'm almost double your age, yeah, but it doesn't. We are a very young country, so I think that's also one of the. I mean, that's again linked to. I mean, when we say we are doing very well, compared to other countries, I think we should also put in the factor that we have. I think 2/3 of our population is below 35.
Yeah,
Yeah,
30.
something 30,
Yeah.
is it? Yeah, so I mean, below 30-year-olds are dying in much lesser numbers anywhere in the world, right? So the fact that even with our awful health system, that relative to other countries we have less deaths, I mean, the age is definitely a factor. But having said that, India is also aging, so the elderly population is also increasing. So I don't think we can kind of completely be complacent and say, we can just relax. And we have a huge, I mean, right now, for instance, India has more people suffering from lifestyle diseases, non-communicable diseases, and this is hitting younger and younger age groups, stuff, heart problems, hypertension, blood pressure, all these things which you normally was associated with middle age or older people. It's now hitting very young people, much younger people. So I mean, I think we there are lots of alerts, early, just say early alert, not even early alerts, signals, and it's up to us as a society whether we want to pay attention or not to these signals. But the signals are very loud, and I think the pandemic and everything that we've gone through, the lockdown, I think is told us or forced us to face a lot of very harsh truths about who we are as a country, what our actual, forget the ads, forget the promos, forget the announcements, forget the dressing up, who are we without all the frills, what are we really like. I think it's exposed this, and now it's up to us and the government to do something about it.
Patralekha, it was a pleasure having you on Lights Camera Azadi. Thank you so much for being part of the show.
Thank you. It was, I think, fun. Hope you had fun also chatting. And
When Patralekha ji asked me कि इंदौर इतना क्लीन होने के बावजूद एक हॉटस्पॉट कैसे बना, well, that pretty much sums up our idea of development. It's not just roads and bridges and cleanliness, but it is also a holistic development which involves health, education, economy. So next time when you will be discussing politics with your local leaders, do question them on these important topics. मुझे उम्मीद है आपको ये शो पसंद आया होगा. अगर आपको ये शो पसंद आया, प्लीज़ मुझे ट्विटर पे रीच करिए. मेरा ट्विटर हैंडल है THOONEDIT. आप मुझे ईमेल कर सकते हो onvandit.jain@outlook.com. आप सब्सक्राइब करें इंस्टाग्राम पे, यूट्यूब पे, एंड स्टे होम, स्टे सेफ. धन्यवाद. जय हिंद.